Welcome to Week Old Beans episode 15. I really need to look and actually see how many episodes we've done before I start the podcast.
It's less people that Putin has killed over the past 5 years.
That's
I know
true.
that as much.
That's absolutely true. Although we can get there with your help and your donation. We can have more podcasts than the amount of people that the Kremlin has murdered. This is episode 15.
I think if we're counting Stalin's reign too, that's like 20 million people. I don't know if we can do that many. We'd have to do a podcast every 10 minutes for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, well, these podcasts are like an hour, so that's statistically not a possibility. Anywho, this is a very a sleepy week old beans. It's like 9 o'clock, and I've had one hell of a past few days. So is Fowler. Fowler's had it going on, though less to the degree that I have, because he's just not as busy and active as I am. You know, I'm a little bit of a freak when it comes to that sort of stuff. Fowler, get off your phone, please. I see
I
the
have to.
No, you don't
I
have to do
have to. I
anything.
have to. I have to do all the thinking in this partnership, so that
What do
takes
you
me
mean?
more
What, you're
time than
looking
you.
at your phone? That's not thinking. Your brain is shut off. What are you looking up? What to say next? You got Chat
Yes,
GPT writing your
exactly,
thoughts for you.
exactly.
Get off your phone, put it down, and engage with the 8 people listening. Okay. Um. And why don't you introduce yourself since you're so keen
You
on?
already introduced me.
No,
You
I
didn't even
didn't.
say
I
my
didn't
name.
introduce shit. You introduce yourself. Okay. I'm too tired to talk.
Do you want to just do it another time then?
No, I'm recording this shit, Fowler. Go. Introduce yourself.
I am Fowler. I am one of the hosts, and you can thank me for a lot of things, bringing intelligence and charm to this. Also, changing the name.
I like how
I've done
you
a lot of
said.
good
I like how you
things
said I'm
for this
one of the
podcast.
hosts. I like how you said I'm one of the hosts. Like there's more than two of us. like there's you're one of the only other host there could be is me.
I'm the important host. That's my job.
Considering the fact that all you do is look at your phone, put on your danky headphones, and talk into a microphone, I'm the one that does all the actual heavy lifting.
You're describing broadcasting that as has been for like 100 years now.
Broadcasting has just been like one person pull. I'm not going to get into this. We have more important shit to talk about, like Barack Obama, former president of the United States, and current enjoyer of uh, many different types of music. Apparently, he actually listens to the music on his yearly review. I don't
We're
know why
gonna.
anybody was shocked about that. He listens to Mitski, you know. He's got
Hmm.
good taste. But we are actually we're not gonna talk about current news. We're gonna actually talk about because honestly, it's been a slow news week, like a very very slow news week. I mean, we have just it's been indictment stuff. It's been Prigozhin, Prigozhin biting the dust. That was kind of a big deal. Uh,
We talked about that already, though,
yeah,
right?
we've talked about Prigozhin. I mean, we've offered our thoughts, which can amount to damn, that's crazy. Uh, um,
It's hard being a Russian oligarch in 2023.
I know it's just a very difficult.
You do one Kremlin coup, and suddenly people want you dead.
Everybody loses their mind. Anyway, so we actually had a very long conversation last week, Fowler and I, about the former president of the United States, and then we thought to ourselves, why don't we do a podcast episode talking about it? Because I really think that we are. I mean, it's weird to say we're far enough out from Barack Obama and his presidency that we can do a retrospect, but um, probably not. But do you want to kind of break down like what our initial conversation was about, if you can remember it, Fowler?
Yeah, we were talking about how Obama is the last great neoliberal president, and he was really the last president we had who wasn't affected by like the populist rush. In a lot of ways, he's like the generation before our generation of politics.
Yeah. A lot of people, he occupies a very interesting, or at least, 50 years from now, he's going to occupy a very interesting position. And that is being sandwiched in between um, George W. and Donald Trump. You know, uh, two presidents with conflicting histories. Not a lot of people. I mean, I think George Bush, and he's one that looking back on, his favorability has soured over the past 15 years. And then, of course,
Within the context, didn't he have like a 20% approval rating by the end of his presidency?
George Bush,
Yeah, I think the Iraq War destroyed him.
yes, it did. I think his response to Katrina also did not help his political aspirations either. Um, I think initially after September 11th, he rallied the nation together, and I think I remember reading his approval rating right after 9/11 was extremely high. Um,
Yeah, like 90% or something.
yeah, and then
But
it
that
just
often happens if you're in the middle of war. Like
yeah,
wartime presidents have powers that other presidents can't,
yeah.
even though close to him.
And then over the years that tanked, and then looking back, it's um,
Well, Bush has an interesting legacy. Although we need to get back to Obama, Bush has an interesting legacy because he is really the beginning of the modern police state. He is the one who kind of created the NSA and Homeland Security. He's the one that basically made it legal to spy on everyone. He's the one who normalized like the surveillance problems that we have today. And
which
he's the
is in
one
the
who
TSA, which is absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to give away our age, but both Fowler and I are, we are, we're not spry young chickens, but we're also not like old as hell. You know, I guess we can dox our age, but I I was I was 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old when September 11th happened. Um, but it's crazy to think that before before September 11th there was no TSA, which is fucking crazy to me. No Homeland Security, no NSA. What there was another agency that was created, right? Was it the DEA? No,
I just know for its homeland and
no
the NSA.
TSA. NSA. I think DEA was also not around, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I mean, we could do a whole episode on George Bush and his legacy because, woo, talk about a. I mean, it's appropriate he was president during the turn of the new millennia because he definitely his actions are going to have shaped probably the next 100 years of American policy, both foreign and domestic. So if anything, George Bush will be in the history books for the foreseeable future. Although not in the way that he probably will want. Uh, and I think Barack Obama is also going to be in the history books for the foreseeable future, though probably more favorably because he occupies a very specific context. Um,
Barack
which is
Obama is protected because he's sandwiched between the two worst presidents in modern history, and also as the first black president and someone who led to the rise of the MAGA movement and the racial resentment politics. Like he will always be remembered as, I think, a victim of the
yeah,
Tea Party and Trump.
yeah. Um, and that's probably a very frustrating legacy on to have being viewed as a victim. Um, I'm trying to recall our conversation that we had, Fowler, because we brought up a lot of good points. I mean, I think you have much stronger words about Obama than I do. Um,
You're more neutral to him.
I'm more neutral. I know you're not particularly a fan. Do you want to, lay out your critiques a bit, and then I'll
Well, it's not
counter?
it's not necessarily that I'm so anti-Obama, although he wasn't a particularly progressive president. Like Obama kind of hid from the gay rights issue. He really didn't talk about race, and you know, I guess the most progressive thing he did was Obamacare, which is a half measure. But it has to be remembered that like before Bernie Sanders, before the rise of the progressive movement with Bernie Sanders and AOC and Tlaib and all them, like Obama was, you know, like he was relatively progressive. It's just that like what it means to be progressive completely transformed in like the 2016 2018 time period. So I think his policies are just not looked on very favorably at this point. by anyone who isn't a political moderate. And those people are a dying breed. So I think Obama is sort of an interesting person in history because he sort of was a man obsessed with legacy who um really just his time was before like great change in the party.
Yeah, no, you know, and you know, my counter when we talked about Obama earlier on was more so that I felt like, you know, looking back on his presidency, you know, I believe he didn't have a majority. Did he ever have a majority in
He
Congress?
had a super majority initially, but he didn't use it for anything.
Yes. And it was right when he became president, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it was right when he became president. And I think, you know, this might be, you know, I didn't think about this when we first talked, but I think this actually might be an indicator of, you know, the importance of building power before you run for president. Now, I am, you know, I'm not too privy on Obama's activities when he was senator, but, you know, from what I understand, he was a senator and then he was president. You know what I mean? Um, he did not have the legacy that someone like, you know, Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders did within the Democratic Party. So I would imagine when he had his supermajority, which was at the beginning of his presidency, he may, you know, it's probably less so that he didn't want to wield it. It probably was that he couldn't. You know what I mean?
I agree. I think the problem with Obama was that like Obama really didn't want to change things and transform things systemically. And so he didn't. You know what I mean? Like you have to have the will to lose that political capital. But it was such a different time. In a sense, Obama is responsible for the populist rise because like the Tea Party, which was sort of the first modern populist movement in a long time, like they came to be as a reaction to him, as a reaction against his blackness. And like the Tea Party leads pretty clearly to Trump. And also Obama not really achieving a lot. I think that created a lot of the cynicism that allowed Bernie Sanders to do so well in the 2016 primary.
Absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I think, you know, I think Obama's unwillingness or inability to be that change, and he never was. You know, I you know, I'm more neutral about Obama mostly because I think a lot of people had expectations for him that just were not true. And I will say, you know, to critique him, you know, I think he should have been more receptive and more. I think he could have been more aware, you know, to what it meant to be the first black president. I
Mm-hmm.
think, you know, like the at least based on my impression of Obama, especially later on in his presidency, you know, he um he went into it thinking that he was going to be given the same level of respect and the same level of agency and authority as, you know, the other 40 something presidents before him, and that just didn't happen. And I don't ever think he really fully embraced that, or, you know, but I don't know, it's a weird situation to be in because on one hand he can't, in his position as the first black president, you know, he can only speak about racism from a colorblind perspective and a you know, hope and change perspective. You know what I mean? Like, um
True, because you have other candidates who are black who really put that idea forefront, like Jesse Jackson, I think his name was I think in the 90s, and he
but Jesse Jackson lost. You know,
yeah,
uh,
that's fair.
I don't know if you know what I mean. Like, I'm not saying that you can't do that as a politician because the party won't let you, but you know, you also have to want to win. You know, and so much of Obama's appeal to, like, you know, suburban, you know, white middle class America, a group of people that are actually, you know, a demographic that's actually eroding. You know, like we don't really have that solid middle class voting bloc, anymore, and they're not as powerful as they used to be. But what really appealed to that demographic, I think, was the fact that he was the shining picture of what a African American man could be to white America. And he had to retain that image in order for him to win re-election against Romney. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Who was everyone's dream. Romney was the Republican, prototype. And I think for him to win that against Romney, there was only so much he could do and say. Because he was
So
representing, this is the last thing I'll say about this, like, he was representing, or I guess from the perspective of a lot of people, you know, you can't rule the majority but represent the minority. You know what I mean?
mm.
Or be the voice of the minority while having to essentially be the authority of the majority.
Well, you have to build a coalition, obviously, but I think like Obama didn't really do that.
Yeah,
You
I
know
was
what I
about to
mean?
say, I
Like he
think
had
too, he
to.
didn't have that. He didn't have that coalition to back him up, like that's, and I think, I don't know if that's because he didn't want to do it or if because he had very limited, I mean, he had
I think it's
experience,
just. I
but
think it's just been a long time since we've had a proper mass movement leader. I think it's been
yeah.
a long time since we've had someone who really was like able to wield the populist playbook effectively. And I think Obama just grew up. He grew up in the New Democrat like Clinton era, and all that stuff was dead. And so he just never realized the potential. But I don't know if Obama would have ever been able to be a Bernie Sanders, even if he wanted to be. I think he's too clean cut. I think he's too moderate, and I think he's just not the right man for that type of playbook.
Yeah, being a populist, you do kind of have to get your hands dirty a little bit. um, yeah, I definitely think he underestimated the Tea Party. I remember you mentioned that. He didn't fully realize the threat that the Tea Party posed.
Yeah, he thought that by being the reasonable indoor voice sort of person, the Tea Party would be revealed to basically be, um, crazy and catastrophizing. And in fact, Bill Clinton did that really well against Newt Gingrich and the Republicans in the 90s. Like, Bill Clinton created this image of Newt Gingrich and the Republicans as basically being these partisan hacks who didn't care about helping the country. And Newt Gingrich had to resign from being the speaker, the most powerful man on the Capitol, because of that. And the strategy just didn't work with Obama. Like his inaction just allowed the Tea Party to take over the legislative branch and then to basically destroy his agenda.
Yeah, God. The Obama years are a blur in my brain. I was so young back then, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't woke. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Um, yeah. God, imagine you're Newt Gingrich and you get fucked up by Bill Clinton.
I
It's so
mean,
funny.
Bill Clinton was a terrible human being and not like a good progressive in any way, but he was, to be fair, like a cunning political animal that would chew off one of his fucking legs to win re-election.
I
You
respect
know,
that. I see what Hillary sees in him. Holy fuck, I'm yawning. I see what Hillary sees in him. Um, you know,
but sometimes you just get trapped in the wrong time period. Like you're on the wrong wave. You're not on the primal wave. I mean, we were talking about the movie Blackberry, and it's similar. Where like the Blackberry guys were
Jesus
incredibly
Christ, you
intelligent.
in this fucking Blackberry movie. Holy shit.
It's a great film,
Guys, just to
but
let
they
y'all
were
know,
they were
Fowler's
they
been
were
talking about
revolutionary.
Blackberry for like 24 hours straight. So if you haven't seen Blackberry, Fowler's going to plug this film to you and say you should go see it. Just a warning if you want to, skip ahead. and go to the actual
There's
interesting
no
part of the
skipping on this
podcast.
podcast.
Absolutely. You can hit fast forward and then you can skip the ads, I'll put an ad blocker in here whenever you start talking
We
about
will
fucking
we will
BlackBerry.
personally hunt you down and kill
Anyway,
you
make
if you
your
try to
fucking
skip forward.
make your point, all right? Make your point about the
The BlackBerry film is really good, and it's basically about like the BlackBerry was the first phone that you could text, email, and call from. It was basically like a computer in a phone, and like it was brilliant and revolutionary. But and, like they were completely overshadowed by the iPhone, which was just a superior design in every way.
you
And
want to suck Steve Jobs' dick. We know. Get to your point.
there isn't a tech man in the world
Whose cocky wouldn't
who's
suck?
who wouldn't respect Steve Jobs for being the goat.
I don't disagree with you, you fucking nerd. Continue on.
What's his name? Only Bell is probably comparable to him in terms of how much he changed information technology.
I love it when you
But
nerd out, Fowler.
but yeah, I think Obama like he misread the moment. He misread the rising populism in the right and the racial resentment, and that it would carry them to power. And then he misread what his own party was capable of. He didn't understand like the full degree of change and how much the Overton window could shift and the huge potential of being the first political figure to really tap into the sort of millennial progressive vote.
Yeah, no, and gosh, you know, I mean, you might be right. Maybe he wasn't that guy. I think a lot of people, especially a lot of African Americans, they had really, or at least younger African Americans who were our age during his presidency. I think it's easy to, and I'm kind of glad that I kind of grew up in the Obama years. A big section of my life was during Obama's presidency, and I remember a lot of the general attitudes of politics at that time because it was his presidency that I really started to actually pay attention to politics. And I remember a lot of the attitudes towards Obama and the thin line that he kind of had to thread. I mean, he was a model citizen, and I know people who, despite the fact that he was a model citizen, they'll still say that Trump is a better husband than he is.
Well,
Despite
the
the fact,
Republicans are just in their own reality now.
yeah, oh, of course, but um, with that all being said, I think that a lot of people, especially a lot of younger people, you know, forget just how different politics was his back during his era, you know. The gay marriage debate was still big, and the I mean, healthcare wasn't even a topic of discussion. I mean, it was so accepted that we would not have universal health care, and it was so accepted that like our healthcare system was, fine the way it was. Police brutality was not even a topic of discussion. I mean, it only became really a topic of discussion towards the end of his presidency with Trayvon Martin in 2012. And, um, that made national attention for a little bit, but for the most part, nothing really shifted after that. And, the big topics during Obama's presidency, from what I remember, was gun control because of Sandy Hook, um, and then like
Guantanamo Bay
Guantanamo, yeah, the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and foreign policy wise, and then
and the recession
yeah,
was him
the
too.
recession in Obamacare, um, Obamacare as a safeguard, not Medicare for all. I know I just said a second ago healthcare wasn't a topic of discussion. Medicare for all was not a topic of discussion whatsoever. The validity of Obamacare was the topic of discussion. So, I mean, that the Overton window has shifted so drastically since he was president.
I think it's important to note like you have to expend political capital to shift the Overton window. Like we could have had perhaps Medicare for all or some of those other things earlier if certain politicians had spent the political capital to make that happen. Like Bernie Sanders and AOC to a lesser extent, like normalizing progressive policy was like a huge cost initially. People forget that like Bernie Sanders was totally out of step with the party. He wasn't tied to leadership. He didn't have a lot of influence within the hierarchy because he took a bunch of incredibly unpopular decisions on policy that at the time was viewed as essentially fantastical and stupid that he would do it.
Yeah, you have to make sacrifices, and you know, you know, I mean, like, I think Obama's skin color is why a lot of people give him more flack than,
Oh,
because
definitely.
and I'm not saying this on the Republican side. I'm saying this on his critics. I think his critics who say he wasn't progressive enough. Um, I think some of that, if he had been, you know, white, or I guess if he had presented as white, I don't think, because I think he was still such a step up from the president that came before him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but I think a lot of people wanted him to come in with the Black Panther, coat on. They wanted him to come in with the I guess enough political acumen to get all of these policies passed, and it's just not how that works. You know what I mean? Um, and so I don't know if his hands were always going to be tied. You know what I mean? I wonder about that sometimes. Like, I wonder if Obama is essentially like a servant to a servant to context. You know what I mean? Like, if he was always going to be our first black president because that's all he could have been. Like, we were never
Mm.
going to get a progressive as our first black president. The country just wasn't at that stage where, you know. So I view him as a necessary part of history. I think I said this to you, Fowler, when we first talked about him. Like, I guess the way I view Obama is not kind of like, like, I view him as a subject of critique, but then I also view him, I think, as a necessary part of an unsavory history.
I don't know. Like, how long can you pass the buck? Like, does Bill Clinton also get a pass? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I totally get what you mean, but I definitely think, like, I think so much of his actions are hamstrung by his skin color, and that's not to say that he couldn't get anything done, but you know, I think that he also might just not be progressive in the way that you and I are. And I think a lot of people just have to contend with that. Like, he is not your progressive. Um,
But it's not even on a policy perspective that his legacy is not going to be as important. Like, he also stylistically and rhetorically is not really the one who's emulated. You know what I mean? Like, in
unless
almost
you're Pete
every
Buttigieg.
way. No, Pete Buttigieg also pretended to be a Bernie crowd. He was
No, no,
initially
no. I'm
for
saying
Medicare for all.
Pete Buttigieg, when he was on the campaign trail, one of the big things everybody kept saying was that he tried to mimic Obama's cadence, not his like policy, but his cadence for sure. It's very funny if
Mm.
you listen to him talk.
Well, Pete Buttigieg is a sociopath, and he was copying everyone. Like, he also copied Bernie.
For those of you who
But
don't
my
know, Fowler does not have very fond opinions on Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg is not
Oh
a real
Lord.
progressive, and it's fine for you to vote for him. But why would you vote for him if there's a real progressive in the race?
Um,
You might as well vote for Kamala if you're going to vote for Pete Buttigieg. They're both
big,
equally progressive.
big if true. Anyway, uh, many such cases. What were you saying a second ago? I forgot because my brain's tired.
Oh, we're just saying, like, I think, I don't know, like, it's funny who's remembered by history and how. And I think in a lot of ways, like, Bernie has a much more powerful legacy on so many different elements of politics than Obama did. And I think even Obama was self aware of this. Like, during the 2020 primary, Obama, not being a progressive, endorsed Warren, Elizabeth Warren, a person he hated because she went behind his back and created the consumer protection. What was it called? Um, Consumer Finance Protection Act or something.
Yeah.
Anyways, um, and he hated her. But the reason he endorsed her was because he was afraid that like the populist wave was inevitable, and so he picked someone he despised because he viewed her as the less bad option out of the progressives in the race.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most telling legacy of Obama is like, you know, he like Joe Biden is so much more progressive than he is,
And
and
Joe's
he
legacy is just going to be completely swamped because of the toxicity that Trump left behind, after he left office, which is sad, because Biden
I
has
don't know.
done a lot.
I think he'll be viewed favorably in time. Like, I think we'll look back on Joe Biden 40 years from now and view him as a pretty good president. It's just
Yeah.
within the current context.
I think
He's sort
Obama
of,
is going to be viewed, maybe not favorably, but I think Obama's position in history is like what you said at the beginning of the podcast, where he is going to be viewed as kind of the the final the final boss of a new era, like, or of an old era. Like he is of the Nixon and Clinton and Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, of the he is of the he is of the political sort of, I don't know what the word would be, but during his presidency, there was a basic understanding of journalistic integrity and certain political rules that were followed. Um, these unspoken rules that politicians abided by. And I think Trump completely, you know, um, I think Trump's presidency has kind of ushered in a new era of politics, in a new generation of politics that, is going to be hard to navigate.
yeah, I think the ceiling is not necessarily existing. Like, there's so much potential of a smart Trump or a more powerful Bernie. Like, the neoliberals, like the height of them is probably Clinton and Obama, but like there's potential for Bernie and Trump to be completely overshadowed because the same material conditions are there and the same tactics are there. If someone was capable of like hobbling it together and creating a real social movement.
Yeah, so I mean, we're in the age of populism now. I guess that's part of it. Obama is he is the final president before we enter the age of populism, just like we did back in the 1920s during wartime. Um,
Yeah.
so you know,
Hopefully it goes less badly than the 1930s. I guess in the end we did okay, but we
yeah.
did allow a homegrown fascist movement to become a thing. We allowed the dictator of Louisiana to basically turn
I
the
was just
state.
about to bring up our boy Huey. I was gonna say, who's gonna be the Huey in this situation, baby?
Yeah, the one thing that's positive about now versus the 1930s is Ron DeSantis is very much like the poor man's Huey Long. He's not as smart, he's not as charming, he has nowhere near the amount of power. He's just
He's got a very high pitched woman voice, and it's very funny. Every time he speaks, I'm like, why do you?
okay. Let's not be homophobic.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm for those of y'all listening. I like women and I like pussy, so I can say things like that. Um,
Listen, there are many things to critique Ron DeSantis about. His weird face and his high pitched voice are not, just because he sounds like a character from.
Fowler, real quick, why
Uh,
do you have an elephant in your house?
what do you mean?
What the fuck was that noise?
That's my toilet.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No,
Is your
it's the
toilet talking to
garage.
you?
It's the
That's
garage.
you need to grease that shit.
No, it means I know when they're coming in and out.
Put grease on that for my sake,
I don't.
for the sake of the viewers
My
whose
family
ears were
does
just
not.
started bleeding.
My family does not grease the outer doors or the garage of my house because that allows us to know.
Get a dog. That's what a dog is for, okay? Put some fucking grease on your garage door and get a fucking dog, and then the dog will tell you
A
when someone's.
dog is thousands of dollars. An ungreased door is just not doing anything. It's free.
All right, whatever
I
you
did the
say.
same. I did the same thing from the place I just moved from. I also picked the creaky door because it allowed me to hear when people were coming in and out.
Just get a ring. They make technology for that now. You don't have to like be like you don't have to do that. Or just get a kitchen knife. Have that in your room.
That seems a little paranoid. I think I'll stick with my creaky door.
Right. Well, if the creepy door goes off, then what are you going to defend yourself with when the creepy man comes into your room? Nothing. See, you're silent. You don't have a fucking plan.
I'll
Get a
use
dog.
my I'll use my martial arts skills.
Your Toshindo that you've not taken in 8 years. That's what you'll use.
It'll come back to me. It's like muscle reflex.
Right? Yeah, you're like Neo. You just plug yourself in to the internet. Fucking download. All right, we need to end this podcast, guys. We're at the 35-minute mark. I feel like that's good. I feel like we talked about Obama. We said his name more than 3 times, so hopefully he doesn't appear in our bedrooms tonight. Uh, um, yeah, yeah, it's I am curious to see in 20 years how Obama is viewed. Because I think it like your like the problem with legacy is that you're not really in control of your legacy at the end of the day. Your legacy is dependent upon so many different things, and I think like a fantastic and who is there to remember you. And I think a great example of this is some of our founding fathers and their legacy. Like when I was in school when I was younger, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, they were all viewed kind of as the quintessential founders of America, which they were and they should be. But we've shifted the Overton window to where especially Thomas Jefferson, his legacy has become incredibly tainted. Um, as more things have been unearthed about him and more things have been learned about him. Christopher Columbus is another really, really good example of this.
And sometimes you're not remembered. The thing you're initially remembered for is not the thing you're remembered for later. Like an interesting fact I learned reading The Populist Persuasion by Michael Kazin is that Abraham Lincoln, him freeing the slaves, was downplayed. And like his generation and the generation directly afterwards, he was remembered as like a pro-union, like great decider of the war. Like he was known for those things. They downplayed the racial component of his legacy. And then it's only now that we view him as like the primary thing is like civil rights.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see, who is empowered to write the Barack Obama legacy. And who that's going to be. So we got some time before we ever figure that out. I'm going to go to sleep. Do you want to sign out, Fowler? Tell the people goodbye.
Goodbye, my people, my beautiful people, all out there across the world.
That's what you're going to say.
It is what I.
It sounds like Buffalo Bill before the end of Silence of the Lambs when he's about to like murder those women.
You keep referencing Silence of the Lambs, and I've never seen it.
Yeah, I've never seen Blackberry either. So yeah, now you know how I feel.
The
okay?
superior film, by the way, Blackberry.
You can't even judge that. You've never seen Silence of the Lambs. Don't get on to me, and then you're over here like you need to watch Blackberry. You need to watch Blackberry. It's a film about a fucking phone.
I'm a man of culture and taste, so of course I've seen the Blackberry film.
Sure you are.
I've also seen the Barbie film
with your handlebar mustache, like you're about to go to like you're part of the Village People. I'm about to fucking sing YMCA outside of a rec center. Fuck you. I'll sign out properly since apparently it's my job to sign out. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this podcast. We should be back with another one next week if shit pops off. If not, we'll just continue to talk about presidents. We can do like Teddy Roosevelt maybe next week. Or like,
sure.
Like Jimmy Carter. I don't know.
I need to finish the book about him.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see y'all in the next podcast.